The silence is deafening. When one of gospel music's most trusted voices refuses to speak, the world demands to know why. Wes Hampton, the powerful tenor who has stood beside Bill Gaither for 2 decades, has become the center of a storm he never asked for. But here's what nobody's talking about. What if his silence isn't weakness at all? What if it's the most calculated, faith-driven decision he could possibly make? Today, we're diving deep into a scandal that's tearing apart the gospel music community, exposing the razor-thin line between loyalty and complicity, and revealing why sometimes the absence of words speaks louder than any statement ever could. By the end of this investigation, you'll understand why Wes Hampton's silence might actually be protecting something far bigger than his own reputation, and why this controversy could fundamentally change how we view Christian leadership forever. Let's set the stage, because understanding the magnitude of what's happening requires knowing exactly who these people are and what they've built. Bill Gaither isn't just another name in Christian music, he's the architect of modern Southern gospel. For over 6 decades, he's written hymns that have been sung in churches across every continent, produced recordings that have defined generations of worship, and created a gospel empire that generates millions annually. The Gaither Vocal Band isn't just a group, it's an institution, a brand that represents purity, excellence, and unwavering faith to millions of believers worldwide. When you see that name, you're supposed to think of Sunday morning comfort, of grandparents singing along in their living rooms, of youth groups finding their calling through music. The Gaither brand means trust, it means safety, it means that your donations are going exactly where they should go. And then there's Wes Hampton, who joined this legendary ensemble in 2005 and quickly became far more than just another talented voice. Hampton brought something special to the group, a combination of technical prowess and genuine humility that resonated deeply with audiences. Born and raised in Tennessee with a voice that could shatter glass and melt hearts in the same breath, Hampton's tenor range became the signature sound of some of the band's most beloved recordings. But what made him truly special wasn't just his vocal ability, it was his character. In an industry often plagued by ego and competition, Hampton was known for his quiet consistency, his genuine faith, and his absolute dedication to the ministry rather than personal fame. He spoke openly about his struggles with anxiety, about the pressure of performing at such a high level, about finding God in the darkest moments of self-doubt. Fans didn't just admire him, they identified with him. He was one of them, just a regular guy blessed with an extraordinary gift, trying to use it for God's glory. For nearly 20 years, Hampton and Gaither built something beautiful together. They toured relentlessly, recorded dozens of albums, and created moments of worship that changed lives. Hampton often spoke about Gaither not just as a boss but as a mentor, a father figure who had guided him through the complexities of ministry and music. Their relationship seemed unshakable, built on mutual respect and shared purpose. Which is precisely why what happened next sent shockwaves through the entire gospel community and forced Hampton into an impossible position that would test everything he believed about loyalty, truth, and public responsibility. March 2025 started like any other month in the gospel music world. Tours were being planned, new albums were in production, and the Gaither machine was running smoothly. Then everything exploded. Multiple Christian news outlets, not tabloids or gossip sites but respected religious journalism platforms, began reporting on something that seemed almost unthinkable. Bill Gaither, the man who had written Because He Lives and countless other hymns about integrity and faith, was under investigation for financial irregularities. The allegations weren't minor bookkeeping errors or simple misunderstandings. According to leaked documents and whistleblower testimony, funds that had been donated to Gaither's humanitarian foundation, money given by faithful supporters who believed they were funding missionary work, youth ministry programs, and disaster relief efforts, had allegedly been diverted. Where did this money go? Reports suggested luxury real estate investments, high-end marketing campaigns for Gaither's personal projects, and various ventures that had nothing to do with the charitable purposes donors had been promised. When the news broke, fans immediately turned to Hampton's social media accounts, expecting some kind of response. A statement of support, a call for prayer, even just an acknowledgement that something serious was happening. Instead, they found nothing. Hampton's Instagram continued posting the same content it always had: scripture verses, photos with his family, behind the scenes, moments from concerts, inspirational quotes about faith and perseverance. His Twitter feed remained focused on music and ministry, with no mention whatsoever of the scandal consuming his industry. No public appearances addressed the issue, no interviews were granted, no carefully worded statements were released through publicists. It was as if the biggest crisis in gospel music history simply wasn't happening, at least not in Wes Hampton's world, and this silence, this absolute refusal to engage with the controversy, has become its own story. Let's dig deeper into what this silence actually means, because it's far more complex than it appears on the surface. In our current cultural moment, silence is often interpreted as complicity. We live in an age where every public figure is expected to have an immediate opinion on every controversy, where not speaking out is seen as taking a side through omission. The phrase "silence is violence" has become common in social justice circles, the idea being that failing to condemn wrongdoing is itself a form of support for that wrongdoing. Many fans have applied this logic to Hampton's situation, arguing that his refusal to distance himself from Gaither sends a clear message that he either doesn't believe the allegations or doesn't care about the victims. Some have even called for Hampton to leave the Gaither vocal band entirely, saying that remaining in the group makes him complicit in whatever financial misconduct may have occurred. But there's another perspective here, one rooted in legal wisdom, personal loyalty, and a different understanding of Christian responsibility. Consider the legal reality first. An investigation is ongoing, but no charges have been filed, no evidence has been made public, no trial has occurred, and no verdict has been reached. In American jurisprudence, we operate on the principle of innocent until proven guilty. Demanding that Hampton publicly condemn Gaither before any facts have been established essentially requires him to abandon that principle and render judgment based on allegations alone. If Hampton were to speak out now, especially if he were to publicly distance himself from Gaither, he could potentially prejudice the investigation, expose himself to legal liability, and contribute to a rush to judgment that might later prove unjust. Lawyers often advise their clients to say nothing during active investigations for exactly this reason, because even well-intentioned statements can be misconstrued, weaponized, or used in ways the speaker never intended. Then there's the loyalty factor, and this is where things get really complicated. Bill Gaither hasn't just been Wes Hampton's employer for 20 years, he's been a mentor who believed in Hampton when others didn't, a guide who helped him navigate the treacherous waters of Christian entertainment, and a friend who walked beside him through personal struggles. In Hampton's public statements over the years, he's consistently referred to Gaither with deep affection and gratitude, calling him one of the most influential figures in his life. Now imagine being in Hampton's position, someone you love and respect, someone who has shaped your entire career and treated you like family, is accused of serious wrongdoing. You don't know all the facts, you weren't involved in the financial decisions, you have no direct knowledge of what actually happened. What do? Do you immediately abandon someone who has meant so much to you based on accusations? Do you publicly denounce them to protect your own reputation? Or do you hold space for the possibility that the truth is more complicated than the headlines suggest, that investigations sometimes clear people rather than convict them, and that loyalty means something even when it's difficult? Hampton's faith tradition offers important context here. In evangelical Christianity, there's a strong emphasis on restoration rather than condemnation, on grace rather than judgment, on speaking the truth in love rather than rushing to denounce. Multiple passages in the New Testament talk about handling conflict within the church privately first, about going directly to a brother who has sinned rather than publicly shaming them, about bearing one another's burdens and restoring those who fall with gentleness. Hampton has spoken many times about his commitment to these principles, about handling difficult situations through prayer and private conversation rather than public spectacle. It's entirely possible that Hampton has spoken to Gaither directly, that he's asked hard questions, that he's expressed concerns, but that he's chosen to do all of this privately rather than turning it into content for public consumption. In fact, this would be entirely consistent with both his personality and his theological convictions. There's also the practical consideration of what Hampton's silence might be protecting. The gospel music industry is relatively small, and scandals have ripple effects that extend far beyond the individuals directly involved. When a major figure falls, it doesn't just affect their ministry, it affects everyone connected to them. Concert venues lose money, supporting musicians lose income, charitable initiatives that actually were legitimate get defunded because donor confidence is shattered, and the broader witness of Christian music to the watching world gets damaged. Hampton might be calculating that adding his voice to the controversy would only amplify the damage without actually helping resolve the underlying issues. By maintaining his focus on ministry and music, by continuing to do the work he was called to do, he might be trying to preserve something worth preserving while the investigators do their job and determine what actually happened. But let's address the elephant in the room, because it would be naive not to acknowledge this possibility. Could Hampton's silence be about self-preservation? Could it be that he's simply trying to protect his own career and income, knowing that speaking out against Gaither could end his position in one of gospel music's most prestigious and lucrative groups? This is certainly possible, and it's the interpretation that Hampton's critics favor. They argue that his silence is cowardly, that he's putting his own financial interests above truth and justice, and that he's failing to use his platform to stand up for donors who may have been deceived. This is a fair critique, and one that Hampton will ultimately have to answer for, whether in this life or the next. However, there's something that often gets lost in these conversations about silence and speaking out, the assumption that we always know what the right thing to say is, and that saying it publicly is always better than remaining quiet. The reality is far more nuanced. Sometimes, speaking too soon means spreading misinformation. Sometimes public statements escalate conflicts rather than resolving them. Sometimes the most responsible thing a person can do is admit they don't know all the facts and wait until they do. This is particularly true in situations involving legal investigations, where the full truth often doesn't emerge until months or even years after initial allegations surface. History is filled with cases where public opinion rushed to judgment, where people were condemned based on accusations that later proved false or exaggerated, where careers and lives were destroyed by mob mentality only for the truth to eventually vindicate the accused. Hampton might be wise enough to recognize this possibility and prudent enough to wait. Let's talk about what's happening behind the scenes, because while Hampton's public silence is absolute, that doesn't mean nothing is happening privately. Multiple sources within the gospel music industry have suggested that Hampton has been involved in extensive private discussions, both with Gaither himself and with other members of the vocal band. These conversations reportedly cover everything from the specifics of the allegations to the future direction of the group to how they can continue their ministry in the midst of this crisis. One source described Hampton as deeply troubled by the situation but committed to getting to the truth before making any public statements. Another suggested that Hampton has been consulting with spiritual advisors, seeking wisdom from trusted mentors outside the Gaither organization, about how to navigate these impossible circumstances. There are also reports that Hampton has been in contact with some of the donors whose funds are in question, listening to their concerns and gathering information firsthand rather than relying solely on media reports. If true, this would be significant because it would indicate that Hampton is taking the allegations seriously and doing due diligence, even if he's not doing it publicly. This kind of private investigation and relationship management wouldn't make headlines, wouldn't generate social media engagement, and wouldn't satisfy those demanding an immediate public statement. But it might actually be more effective at getting to the truth and helping everyone involved, including potential victims. The theological dimension of this situation deserves serious consideration because Hampton's faith isn't just background information. It's the core of who he is and how he makes decisions. In numerous interviews over the years, Hampton has talked about his understanding of Christian witness, the idea that believers are always being watched by a skeptical world looking for hypocrisy and failure. He's expressed concern about how Christians handle conflict, noting that when believers attack each other publicly, it damages the credibility of the gospel message itself. Jesus prayed that his followers would be known by their love for one another, but too often Christians are known for their vicious infighting and their readiness to devour their own at the first sign of scandal. Hampton's silence might be motivated by a desire to handle this situation in a way that honors God, rather than feeding the culture's appetite for drama. In an age where Christian leaders often seem more concerned with hot takes and viral moments than with wisdom and discernment, Hampton's refusal to participate in the spectacle could actually be a form of prophetic witness. He might be saying, through his silence, that not everything needs to become content, that some situations require prayer and patience rather than tweets and statements, and that the way Christians handle accusations against one another should look different from how the world handles them. This doesn't mean there's no place for accountability or that wrongdoing should be covered up. If the allegations against Gaither prove true, there absolutely must be consequences, restitution for donors, structural changes to prevent future abuse, and appropriate discipline for those involved. But Hampton might believe that his role in that process isn't to serve as judge, jury, and executioner before the facts are fully known. Instead, his role might be to continue being faithful in his own calling, to maintain his integrity regardless of what others do, and to trust that God will ultimately bring truth to light. The impact on Hampton's career and reputation cannot be understated. Before this scandal, Hampton was universally beloved in gospel music circles, known as one of the good guys, someone with genuine faith and authentic humility. Now, that reputation is under scrutiny in a way it never has been before. Some fans have lost respect for him, viewing his silence as a failure of moral courage. Others have gained respect for him, admiring his refusal to pile on or join the mob. The long-term effects will depend largely on how this situation resolves. If Gaither is ultimately cleared, and the allegations prove false or exaggerated, Hampton's patience will be vindicated, and his loyalty will be seen as admirable. If Gaither is found guilty of serious wrongdoing, Hampton will face difficult questions about why he didn't speak up sooner and whether his silence enabled further harm. What's fascinating is how this situation illuminates the impossible standards we place on public figures, especially Christian ones. We want them to be immediately informed about complex situations. We want them to have perfectly calibrated responses that acknowledge all sides. We want them to be both loyal and principled, both gracious and uncompromising. We want them to know things they couldn't possibly know yet, and to make judgments before adequate information exists. And when they can't meet these impossible standards, we condemn them for it. Hampton is learning what many Christian leaders before him have learned, that sometimes there simply is no right move, no statement that will satisfy everyone, no position that won't be criticized. Looking at the bigger picture, this scandal and Hampton's response to it reveals something important. about the current state of Christian celebrity culture. The gospel music industry has created celebrities, stars with fan bases and brand deals, and carefully managed public images. These celebrities are expected to be both relatable and aspirational, both humble servants and polished professionals, both ordinary believers and extraordinary talents. When scandal strikes, these tensions become impossible to manage. Fans feel betrayed because they thought they knew these people. Critics pounce because they've been waiting for proof that Christian celebrity is inherently corrupt. And the celebrities themselves are trapped between their public personas and their private realities. Hampton represents a particular type in this world, the reluctant celebrity who never really wanted fame but got caught up in something bigger than himself. He's not flashy, doesn't court attention, and seems genuinely uncomfortable with the spotlight. Which makes his current situation even more ironic. His desire to avoid drama and maintain privacy has itself become dramatic and newsworthy. His silence is louder than any statement could be because we live in a culture where silence itself is remarkable. As weeks have passed since the allegations first surfaced, the investigation continues. Gaither's concerts are still happening, though there are reports of decreased attendance in some markets and more empty seats than usual at venues that used to sell out instantly.